These testimonials are representative of my or our experiences, but the exact results and experience will be unique and individual to each person. The information provided herein is not medical advice and is not intended to substitute for the advice of your personal physician or other healthcare providers.
Well, hello, everybody. This is your host, Leanne Hayden of the Beautiful Bag Podcast. Welcome to this week's episode. This week, I'm bringing to you, our guest is Chloe Moody. We're going to have her story. Her story is a little different. We haven't had someone who's been in an ostomy for their entire life on here yet. So we're going to talk about that because it's definitely going to be a different conversation. And she's a young woman, but she's had her colostomy since basically right after birth. So Chloe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're really excited to have you here because your story is definitely unique and needs to be heard, because I think there's a lot more people out there than we even realize that have, there's 13.5 million around the world. And we're hearing more and more now. So let's get into it. So your story is definitely different. So you had your colostomy since you were basically a newborn.
So I was born with something called necrotizing enterocolitis. It's usually in premature babies, but I was actually full term. So it just was like an emergency situation. And so my intestines just kind of died, like all the tissue became necrotic and they all just died. And so they just kind of saved whatever they could, which was a very small portion. And so I do have short bowel syndrome that I've had my whole life. And so I got my first ostomy when I was probably about 2 weeks old, though I don't know like my full history of all of that. Yeah. And I had also a G tube, like a gastric feeding tube, until I was about 5, just because it was so hard for me to maintain like weight as a short bowel child. And for the first like about 5 years of my life, I was kind of in and out of the hospital, surgeries, and things like that. So it was a pretty like difficult like childhood. I didn't really have like the normal kid kind of thing.
Right, like getting up, going to school, well, even preschool, all that stuff, because you were probably spending a lot of time, like you said, you had a feeding tube for a long time, and then spending a lot of your time in and out of the hospital for surgeries, because, over the years, you said 14 different surgeries. But yeah, as a child, how is that on your parents? Do your parents and you ever talk about all that?
Honestly, we didn't a lot, because for them, that was like a very traumatic period in their life. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't really talk about it very much with me. It wasn't until I don't think I even knew like my actual like what I had when I was born, like the reasoning for everything, until I was probably 12. Because by that time I had been going to the youth rally, summer camp, and there was a big thing there, like, what do you have? What do you have? And I didn't know. And so that was kind of the first time that I was like, wait a minute, I don't actually know what had happened to me. But my parents just they didn't really want to like relive all of that.
Right. It's going to be traumatic. You're their baby, you're their beautiful little girl, and to go through something like that with a child is definitely not an easy thing. So as a preschool kid, you're in and out of surgeries. Did that continue into your adolescence, like through elementary school, middle school? What's that like for you growing up?
It did. It was, I think the most difficult was preschool and kindergarten, because in preschool I still had my G tube, and it did like kind of protrude significantly like in clothing, and I was I only wore like leggings or stretchy pants, and I would have a lot of like accidents with my like ostomy at school. And then in kindergarten, that was my first time like in like a regular mainstream school, and I was sick a lot. Like there was a period where I was in the hospital for 2 weeks in kindergarten, and it was like a whole big deal when I came back to school, and the whole class like clapped, and I was like, what's going on? But It was,
You were used to that. I mean, like you
yeah,
said,
I was,
at the hospital, so you were used to it. They probably were like, "Hey, we miss our friend. Where's our friend?"
I mean, it was obvious that I was like a sick kid. Like I was very pale and sickly and just like underweight and tired. But I did have like a period probably when I was like probably 7 to 12 when I was like pretty stable and didn't have really any like hospitalization, like major hospitalizations for like probably about 5 years. But I was like bullied a lot in school. I did have like I actually used a urostomy bag for my colostomy because that was just what my parents were given and they didn't know the difference and they didn't necessarily like look for better options.
Okay.
And so my dad emptied my colostomy for me until I was about 8 years old. And it was just like so painstaking getting like the colostomy output through a
Your
urostomy.
urostomy hole.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow. So that is definitely a learning point for us and us, the listeners out there, because I mean, this wasn't that long ago. This wasn't even 20 years ago. This is probably because you're
Probably.
early 20s. So yeah, just
Yeah.
just under 20 years ago. I mean, things have definitely changed. But I think the awareness that has come just in the last 8 years
Yeah.
is definitely growing more and more and more. But to not know that there is other appliances out there at that point in time.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
so how did you deal with the bullying in school?
Well, in elementary school, I honestly just didn't really have any friends. I was just called like bag girl was like the one that they was like most often. And it was also like a see-through pediatric one. It was just like just how small I was versus how like large it would get. Like it was very obvious. And I just didn't like have really any friends and everybody like made fun of me. And I actually moved schools in the 4th grade. And then at that school there was another disabled kid that was using a wheelchair. So the spotlight wasn't necessarily on me anymore, but like I did still have an aide. I had an aide in school who would kind of take me to and from the bathroom, even though I didn't necessarily need her. Like she would just keep a log and go back and forth with my parents. And so like by the time like I got to like the 5th or 6th grade, like kids did like catch on, like, well, why do you have an aide? And why
Mhm.
you bring they would see me like bringing, my stoma supplies and stuff. Like, well, what is all that stuff?
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, I just didn't really have very many friends like ever in school because I was just always different.
That must have been hard.
Yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, it was, and it definitely like did affect my social development like in the long term, like as an adult.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
you seem fine now. I'm just gonna say. You're doing well now, and if I could go back there, I'd help take care of you and those bullies. Um, what would you, so before we even go on, what would you, knowing what you know now as a young adult, to what you went through as a child through school, what would you tell your younger self?
Well, I would tell them like, someday you're gonna be like really proud to have this, and you're gonna change a lot of people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because when I would like it just affected me so severely, especially in high school, that I had a revision surgery when I was 16, just because my stoma had like gotten very unhealthy over those past 16 years. And so I said, okay, well, can you just move it down as low as possible so that nobody can see it?
Mm-hmm.
Just because I was so affected by all of that. And I do regret that decision now because it is so low and inconvenient for me now as an adult. And it just is like, that was just a culmination of my whole life of being like bullied for that. And just having, especially, in high school when I wanted to just dress like other teenagers and wear like little crop tops and things. And everybody would be like, what is that? Why do you have that? And I don't know, it was just like an out and I was like kind of outcasted. Um, but it was also because I moved schools a lot. But just because I had a whole like I made that decision that like affects me like for the long term because of that experience. So
how does that affect you? So at 16, you make a decision. When did you start? Right. When did you start? I'm like, we can go through so many different things here. We're unpacking this. So when did you start and figure out, when did your parents figure out that there is a different type of a bag for you to use, like a colostomy bag versus the urostomy?
they didn't, I did. So when I went to the youth rally when I was 11, I had met other children at like UOA events before, like just a couple others, and I had like a local like one in the Bay Area. But I had never been around like that many other children with ostomies and diversions, and I was like the only one that was using this type of appliance. And at the youth rally, they have a whole room of supplies that are donated by the companies, and they just encourage you to take and try as much as possible. And so that's kind of what I did. And my parents actually like did tell me to do that my first year, because they were like, well, just try everything that you can. And so they knew that it wasn't what I had wasn't working for me, but they wanted me to figure it out. So I got a bunch of different things, and I did probably over the next like 2 years, I tried a bunch of things. And then there was another girl at youth rally that there was only two of us with the same, because necrotizing enterocolitis is pretty rare. So there was only one other person with the same diagnosis as me, and she used closed end bags. And I was like, wow, that sounds so much better. I've never seen that before. And so I went home and like was showing my parents, and I was like I really want to use these ones, because it seems like I didn't like having to like empty it and clean all of it off. It just seemed like so inconvenient for me. My parents were like, that's not very economical, because you have to throw those away every time. But you can still reuse them, and I do.
Yeah.
But so that was when I switched like to my own, like I just kind of tried things out over a couple of years. And I don't remember when I like permanently switched, probably when I was like 15 or 16 to closed end.
And did that make your life a little better?
It did, because like when I did try some with like the Velcro and the clips, and I just did not trust those. I had them like one time like at Girl Scout camp, I had one just like just fall and just go everywhere, like just while I was just carrying logs. And it was just very inconvenient. So I don't know, like I know some people don't like having the whole like cleaning the end of it off and everything before you do the Velcro back up, and I just didn't like that. So it was just it felt more sanitary for me personally to have the closed end.
Yeah, I wear closed end too. I wear the Hollister Mini closed end, like the, because I'm like, I'm only 5'3". I mean, you're not tall. You're like me, right? So I'm only 5'3". So I'm like, I can't use, do the 9-inch, and you're like, that's too long. 7 inches, just right.
Yeah, especially because mine is so low. So I have to use the mini ones because it's just way too long.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're 16, you decide to have this neck surgery to fix it, move it, and you're still going through life. You must have had some friends through, I mean, you've had friends probably through the UOAA youth rallies that you had met and other things like that, but through school.
Yeah, I mean, I did have like one friend growing up that was just because our mothers had gone to college together. But I never had any, but we didn't go to the same school district at all. And so I didn't have any friends like at school. I did Girl Scouts, but I was like really tired as a child, just like from short bowel, and I was just so fatigued all the time. Like I didn't have the energy to like play with other kids or go after school with other kids. And I was also a little bit sheltered. I wasn't like allowed to play sports until high school. And my parents were like really careful about like letting me go to other people's houses, because I was just like they don't want to deal with all this. Like put that on somebody else's parent. But I never had I did. I mean, yeah. So I had a hard time relating to other kids. Like I had a hard time relating to people my age that weren't sick, that didn't have to deal with this. I was like, what are you guys complaining about? You have no worries. I just had nothing in common with anybody else. And
So when did that change for you?
I don't think it has. Like,
Really?
I still like most of my friends are, I mean, back then, pretty much all of my friends were from Youth Rally, but they were all over the country. So we would just talk like after school and stuff, like on Facebook Messenger and things. But I still, like to this day, like most of my friends are in the chronic illness and ostomy community from the UOA, from other young ostomate things. I mean, in grad school, I have a few friends, but I just never, I don't have a like a lifelong best friend that I've had my whole life, or I don't have a friend group from high school that I was friends with. I had like a unconventional education and experience and everything just as a result. So I think that played a factor.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't have a lifelong friend from elementary school. I mean, and I'm old. I mean, you're talking three at this point, right? So, you're not missing anything there, my friend, at all. However, that couldn't have been, well, again, you don't know any different, right? You didn't know any different. It's just been the way that your life has always been. And I'll tell you, I think the majority of people in ostomies or not nowadays can probably relate to, all my friends live all over the world, all over the country, and we text each other or we message with each other or we jump on Zoom if we want to see each other's faces or FaceTime, because that's just the way our world is now, right? It's definitely different.
Yeah, but I'm glad because I mean, I am one of the youngest people like in the community with an ostomy. But I'm glad because I've had like my friends in their later 20s and early like 30s kind of to look to, like growing up, like this is what my adulthood with an ostomy and a chronic illness, like this is how you approach life in this situation, because I was never really taught that. Um, so I'm glad that I've had kind of all of those, all of them, like that, this community.
Right. And where did you find the community? I'm assuming you found a lot of it through UOAA or UOA back in the day. Because you did do the youth rallies and things like that, and you've gone to all the conventions, as a young adult. When did social media and seeing people in social media kind of step in for you?
I think that started when I was about 12. So I had graduated my elementary school, went until the sixth grade. But by the time I had hit like puberty, that was when my body started to just like go crazy again, because just dealing with like puberty and growth spurts and everything, I just didn't like, it couldn't keep up. And so I was like not really well enough to go to like real middle school, and my parents were also in the process of buying a house in a different like area, so it worked out for them to just have me do school like like homeschool. Yeah, and so it was that time that I just was feeling like particularly alone. And so that was the first one I found was Jessica Grossman's Uncover Ostomy. Like that that's very date, like this is like 2012.
Yeah.
um but and I read that blog like every day, like every time it came out, like it was the first like young woman that I had seen, because in the UOA, like I did go to meetings like as a child, like my local chapter, but they were older people, and at the conference and even at youth rally, like most of the children, most of, especially now, but not as much back then, most of them have continent diversions. There was probably about 6 people in the colostomy group, and everybody in the ileostomy group was just talking about reversals. So I didn't, and which was not never an option for me. So I still really didn't have anybody to like look up to until I found that blog, and then then shortly after I started watching Maggie Baldwin Trenton's videos. um, and so those were the main two that I started following, and yeah.
Yeah. And now it's different. So let's
Yeah.
talk about life now. So you graduate college, you go through all that. We talked middle school, we talked elementary, preschool, middle school, high school, basically, but you went to college. I mean, you're a smart girl, right? So what are we doing here? What did you go to school for?
I went to UC Berkeley.
Like I said, smart girl.
Um, I grew up in a highly academic household.
Mhm.
So my parents are also professors with many humanities degrees that are overeducated. So it was kind of like the family business. But as a disabled child, I was never like, it was never like, what are you going to be when you grow up? This is what you have to figure out what you're going to do. like there was no expectation for me to do anything other than go to college. And I feel like most people my age were led to believe that if you get a college degree, then that's just like your ticket to life. And
Which is not really the thing.
yeah. Yeah. So I actually ended up going to community college first. It was a couple blocks away from my parents' house, and I was upset about it at first, but I did need that kind of transitional period because I had struggled with my health so much in high school that I didn't necessarily have like the grades to go right to a 4 year. And I know that was like the best decision for me because I really like found myself at community college, and I went there for 3 years and got 3 associate's degrees. And then I transferred to Berkeley in fall 2020.
Mhm.
And so it was all virtual. So that also was affected my like my social life and socializing because it was just hard to make friends when everybody was complaining about how they're getting cheated out of their education at Berkeley because it has to be virtual.
And you're like, hey, like I'm used to this.
Yeah, I had done about half of my community college studies online because it was just so much easier for me than commuting. And just like just it was so much energy that was just like it was way too much energy for me to be commuting to campus. So it was great for me to do it virtually, and I thrived that way, but it was a highly competitive academic environment. So that definitely took a big toll on my health, and I was just very unwell for most of my time at Berkeley, just as a result of just the stress of it all. And then also the pandemic was going on,
Mhm.
and all the pressure. But I still graduated in 2 years, barely. I did miss my graduation because I was in the hospital, and I had sepsis 3 times in my last year of Berkeley. But I graduated, and then I took a year off working in retail, because I got an English degree. So my degree is in English and minored in disability studies.
Mhm.
Um, and then I
So
was like,
what would you do with that? So what are you going to do with that? So English, so writing, right? You're a columnist. And a minor in the disabilities. So what are your thoughts around what you want to do with that? Because there's so much you can do.
yeah. And initially I wanted to work in publishing, but I quickly realized that you have to move to New York for that. And then by that time, I had kind of just cultivated this life here in Napa. And I was living with my boyfriend, and I wasn't really in a position to go where the jobs are like you're told to do. And also on my state insurance, you can like a person with a chronic illness, it's very difficult for you to just move across the country. So uh, I was like, I've always wanted to be a writer. I honestly, so I write a column called Young in Napa in the Napa Valley Register, just my local paper. And I just do other freelance writing. I've written for the Phoenix. I was on the cover when I was 16. Um, and I'm still kind of figuring out what I want to do with it. But ultimately, I want to teach community college because it just had such an impact on my life that that's what I want to do. So I'm getting my master's degree right now at San Francisco State in English literature. And so I'm hoping to teach just like English at community college.
I think that is a beautiful goal. And you're doing a lot of advocacy work with your messaging, with your writing, with the work that you do through the Phoenix, through the UOAA. And and you're still in school, you're going for your master's, studying's not easy. All that stuff. And so your story is just so unique and beautiful, girl. You are more relatable than you think you are. Your story relates so much more. Do you know that there are parents out there right now listening to this and they're saying, what can I do? What should I be aware of for my child? What would my child need? And if those parents were listening right now, what would you want them to know now?
Well, I do think that I would say like you should send them to the youth rally because it did like being around other children and even other like adults with ostomies, like it was a very empowering environment. And it really like it really had like a significant effect on my self-esteem and just like how to live with it, and just knowing that I wasn't alone. Like that's the motto, you're not alone. But also like it'll be okay. Like I've seen people like commenting on things like, oh, I hope like my daughter will someday like find somebody to accept her, and like they will. Like it's gonna be okay. Like there we have a whole community now to support and uplift like this next generation, you know. But I do think that there is like definitely like we never people like we people with who've had their ostomies their whole lives that never had to adjust to this. Like I do think that we are kind of discounted a little bit in the community because we never had to make this life-altering adjustment and we never knew anything different. And people say that to me at conferences, oh, you can't relate to this because you don't know anything different. But like that it just feels like our experiences are discounted because this is our normal. But that doesn't mean that like I did struggle a lot with it, especially in high school when I was like coming of age, you know, becoming a teenager and thinking that like nobody will want to date me. And I did like I looked into every option of getting like a J pouch, a continent diversion, or something like, but I knew that that wasn't an option for me, but I just wanted so badly to be normal.
And that hasn't stopped you from dating.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say that I wasn't one of those people that was like excessively dating. I'm more of a relationship person. Like I'm very like I like attachment. I don't really I wasn't really looking, I was never really looking for like a casual thing.
Right.
But honestly, at first I was like with the youth rally, I was like, oh, this is just my dating pool. I'm just relegated to other people with issues, with chronic illness and things. And so like I had a couple of relationships with, you know, people that I had gone to youth rally with, but it just wasn't like, I mean, that was, you know, my high school relationship, but I just like as an adult and as I was becoming like more active in the community and attending conferences more, I realized like I deserve better than this, you know? And I did have like a couple other like I was just in a pattern of abusive relationships, whether it was from people from youth rally or people that I had met on Tinder, like because I was just like, who would want to be with me? And then around the time I had gained like a bunch of weight from being a freshman in college. And so like that added to it. And at the time I was just thought that nobody would want to be with me. And that I didn't like deserve like, you know, like somebody as handsome as my fiance is. But yeah, that wasn't the case
It wasn't the case. So how'd you guys meet?
on Tinder. But
That's okay. It's the way of the world now.
yeah, I mean, we were both looking for a relationship. Like we both wanted the same things. So yeah, we met in the fall of 2017, or like actually winter of 2017, like right at the end. And so we've been together for over 6 years. And we moved in together during the pandemic because it was just easier than traveling back and forth. And yeah, I mean, he has been with me like for so many like right I like 6 months after we started dating, I had my like Barbie butt surgery done because they made me wait until I was 18. And so he was there like he stayed at my parents' house and came every day to the children's hospital because I was 18, just like to visit me. And when I had this like retraction and blockage one time, he like left work and came to the emergency room and he took me to the hospital like every time that I had sepsis. And but he has his own like mental health issues as well. So I mean, he's had hospitalizations and things. So we're just there for each other, and we've gone through a lot more than couples our age, and that just makes us stronger.
It definitely does make you stronger because you both are young and you've gone through a lot in a short amount of in a short amount of time. I mean, you're 25 years old. You know, or just about 25 years old. And that's a lot. It's a lot to go through. It's a lot to grow up with. And, but what are so you're dreaming of finishing up your master's. So the goals are finishing up your master's, teaching at the community college. You're living together with your fiance. You're probably starting to plan that wedding stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So life is good. So that little girl who struggled so hard turned out to be pretty awesome. She was pretty awesome then too, by the way.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the lifetime of trauma, like it's a lifetime of trauma. I didn't have a childhood. I wasn't properly socialized. I spent a lot of my college experience in the hospital, so I don't have like the Berkeley resume of clubs and everything that most people have. So it did have a substantial effect on me as an adult, and just like not being kind to myself, and just kind of still like hearing, like reliving like the voices of, because growing up, like it was very stigmatized. Just like even my parents, they were like, nobody needs to know about that. You don't need to show anybody or tell anybody. And when I went to youth rally, everybody was wearing like two-piece swimsuits and everything, which was like great. And so it made me feel comfortable enough to do that. And so when I asked my mom if I could get like a bikini to wear when I was 14, and she was like, I don't think you're ready for the comments that you're gonna get. And so I just like, even like everybody, including my parents, just instilled in me my whole life that you should not talk about it. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to hear about it. And then like now, when, with social media and with everything, I was kind of like, I've just been silenced my whole life. And now I feel like, just as a result of that, I've kind of been stifling like my own voice a little bit, because I've just had that messaging my whole life. And even when I was like maybe 18 or something, I had asked like at one of the conventions if I could like speak, and they said, "Oh no, you're too young."
Yeah, well, some of those conventions, they will tell you you're too young. But you're not, because you do have a voice. Girl, listen, you're here on the podcast. You're sharing your story to hundreds and thousands of people right now. Not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands of people right now. Your story, you're sharing your voice. You're getting a little bit louder too. When I met you at the convention, you're very shy. You're very shy. And you're stinking adorable. And so, but now you're starting to, your voice is getting louder. You're wanting to share more. Is that
It's
helping
just-
you go through some of your trauma?
Yeah, it is. I am. So I was recently laid off last year. So I've kind of taken some months of self-discovery and learning more about myself. And it's kind of out of just like kind of pent up frustration of my life, just being silenced, feeling like I had to move my stoma down to fit in. And then at the convention, I was shy because I don't have IBD, because everybody was saying, "Oh, you can't relate to this. You don't understand this. You wouldn't know about this because I have something rare, because I have never known anything different. I have just felt like I was just made to feel like I don't have anything to add."
But you do. But you do. And you do a lot. And like I said, there are so many young women, young children, young women that maybe they do have IBD, or maybe they do have something, but they are what do they do going through school with this? What are lessons that you can teach them? There are children who are born the same way as you. You're not the only one that way. You might not have known anybody yet, but you're not the only one. There are plenty of people, and you just haven't met them yet. And now, with you getting older, getting a little bolder, wanting to share your story, coming in here, and I have to thank you so much for sharing your story today, because it is so unique and it's needed. It is so needed, because there are parents out there right now with babies and they're like, what is my child's life going to be like? How can I be a better parent? What should I tell my child? What should I allow my child to do? I mean, and as a young parent, and again, 20 something years ago, it's definitely different than what it is now for a parent of a child then. Now it's in your face. Now there's more things that you can learn. Now you can do a little more research. You know, you said you found Jessica Grossman in 2012. And she was pretty much the first person who really started talking about stuff loudly. And now everybody else is right behind her. So get bolder. Get bolder. Because it's your story is needed, Chloe. It's needed. And you're going to help a lot of people. A lot of people.
Thank you. I mean, that is kind of also my goal with, I'm sharing more about like my personal life on my column, and I did write a column in the Berkeley newspaper like one summer there about, you know, being a disabled student on campus. And so I have found ways of getting my story out there and being bolder and trying to kind of combat those like kind of voices that I still have, like, because honestly in high school a lot of people would say like, oh, you're just showing that for attention, you're just doing this for attention. Like that was a big thing in high school. Like whenever I would be bold in high school and kind of show like pictures of me like in the hospital having surgery, things like that, for like when I had my revision, for example, like you just want attention, like, and it just trying to combat all of those and be bolder and get my voice out there. But it is just hard because also just like the algorithm and everything amplifies more relatable voices, people with common illnesses. And I do want to reach like parents of children, but like realistically, like people like doctors do not push ostomy surgery as much as they used to.
Right.
A lot of kids that are born with the same thing that I had, you know, with technology, they're able to just become continent and never know that anything happened to them, you know? And, you know, with every like the 3-step surgery, like, oh, you're going directly to reversal. It just is like so forced that nobody wants to live like this.
Yeah, but there are 13.5 million around the world of us that are living like this. That's a whole heck of a lot of people that are living with an ostomy, with an ostomy, you know. And some things you could even do on social media. You could do a child photo of yourself and do a photo of yourself now and say what I would tell her today, and write what you would tell her today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. I don't have that many pictures of me in hospitals or anything as a
But you
child.
don't have to. You can have a little picture of you in a cute little dress on Easter when you were 5, you know, and use that. Just because you don't have to have that. You can use that. You can talk to that child. You can tell her story. You can tell your story. Because it's a very important story, Chloe. Very important story. So with that, I need to thank you so much for sharing it here with us today. If there was, and I ask this to every single person, if there was just one thing that you would want to leave our listeners with, what would that one thing be?
I mean, in this like rich, amazing community that we have, everybody's story is valid. Everybody's experience is their own, unique, and valid, no matter how many followers they have or what their illness was or when they got their ostomy, or everybody's experience is their own and is valuable and will help somebody.
It will, and you are, and you are. And I hope you know that, because you are. So thank you again for being here with us this week. And for all you listeners, listen, this is a story that needs to be shared. So please do us a favor. Click that share button, get it out into social media. I will leave Chloe's links for her social media in the show notes so you can find and get in touch with her as well. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to rate and review, because the more ratings we have, the more reviews we have, the more shares we have, the more this podcast will grow, for the sole fact of stories like Chloe's and yours being shared more. So Chloe, thank you so much again for being here with us this week.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored. Thank you.
You're welcome.